The Echoes of Sincerity, The Three of the Cave. The sky above the jagged peaks of the ancient mountains had turned the color of a fading bruise, heavy with the weight of an oncoming storm. Three travelers, their cloaks fluttering in the rising wind, watched as the first heavy drops of rain began to crater the dust at their feet. They were far from the nearest village, and as the heavens opened in a relentless downpour, the mountain path transformed into a treacherous river of mud and loose shale. Seeking refuge from the freezing deluge, they spotted the dark, arched mouth of a cave carved into the limestone cliffside. They scrambled inside, their breathing heavy and ragged as the air transitioned from the scent of rain to the thick, stagnant smell of damp earth and ancient stone. For a moment, they stood in the shadows, watching the lightning illuminate the valley below. Then, without warning, a sound louder than the thunder echoed through the chamber, a grinding, bone-shaking roar. A massive boulder, loosened by the saturation of the rain, tore free from the heights and plummeted, sealing the entrance with a final, deafening thud that vibrated through their very bones. Darkness, absolute and suffocating, swallowed the three men. They rushed toward the entrance, their fingers clawing at the cold, unyielding surface of the stone, but the mountain did not move. They shouted until their voices grew hoarse, but the roar of the storm outside drowned out their cries. It was then that the cold reality settled into their hearts. No human being knew they were here, and no physical strength could move the weight of the earth. One of the men, his voice trembling but steady, spoke into the void. He reminded his companions that their only hope lay not in their muscles, but in the purity of their past. "Nothing will save us from this tomb," he whispered, "except that we call upon Allah by the most sincere of our good deeds, the ones we did when no one but He was watching." The first man stepped forward, his heart traveling back many years to a small, humble dwelling on the edge of the wilderness. He had been a shepherd, a man of simple means whose life was defined by a quiet, unwavering devotion to his elderly parents. Every evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon, he would milk his flock and carry the fresh vessel to his mother and father. He never allowed his own children, who would often huddle around his feet crying from hunger, to drink a single drop until his parents were satisfied. One evening, the search for lost sheep had taken him deep into the valleys, and he returned long after the stars had claimed the sky. When he entered the home, he found his parents already deep in sleep. Rather than wake them or divert the milk to his hungry family, he stood by their bedside. He stood there, the heavy vessel held steady in his calloused hands through the long, quiet hours of the night. His legs grew numb and his feet ached, yet he remained motionless until the first light of dawn touched the horizon and his parents opened their eyes. Turning his face toward the dark ceiling of the cave, he prayed, "O Allah, you know I did that only to seek your face. If you were pleased with me, then relieve us from this distress." A groan of shifting stone filled the cave as the boulder slid upward, revealing a sliver of gray light, yet the gap was still far too narrow for a man to pass. The second man, emboldened by the light, shared a secret he had kept buried in the deepest chambers of his soul. He spoke of a time when he was consumed by a forbidden passion for a cousin of his. He had pursued her for years, driven by a desire that clouded his judgment. Finally, during a year of devastating famine, she came to him in desperate need of gold to feed her family. He saw his opportunity and offered her a large sum of money, but only in exchange for her virtue. In her desperation, she agreed. But at the very moment he was about to commit the sin, she looked at him with eyes full of tears and whispered a single sentence, "O servant of Allah, fear Allah, and do not break the seal except by right." The words struck his heart like a bolt of lightning, shattering his arrogance. Despite his overwhelming desire and the money he had already surrendered, he stood up and walked away, leaving the gold in her hands purely out of awe for his creator. "O Allah," he cried out in the darkness, "if I left that sin only for your sake, then move this rock further for us." Again, the mountain groaned, and the boulder shifted, widening the crack of light. Yet they remained trapped in their stone prison. Finally, the third man spoke, his voice filled with the weight of responsibility. He told of a worker he had once hired to till his land. When the work was finished, a dispute arose over the wages, and the worker left in anger without taking his pay. Instead of absorbing that wealth, the employer invested it. He bought a single goat, which birthed another, and over the years he managed that small wage as if it were his own life's work. The single goat became a flock, the flock became herds of cattle and camels that filled the valley. Years later, the worker returned, now an old man dressed in rags, asking for his long-forgotten pay. The employer pointed to the horizon and said, "All that you see, the cattle, the sheep, and the servants who tend them, is yours." The worker thought it was a cruel joke, but the employer insisted, handing over every single animal and profit without keeping a single coin for his labor. "O Allah," the third man prayed, "if I acted with such honesty only for your sake, then open the path for us." As the final words left his lips, a thunderous crack echoed through the mountainside. The great boulder rolled aside completely, as if pushed by the breath of the wind. The three men stepped out into the crisp post-storm air, the morning sunlight blinding and beautiful. They realized then that while the world may never have seen those hidden acts of sacrifice and restraint, the one who moves the mountains had seen them all. They walked down the mountain not just as survivors, but as men who had witnessed the miraculous power of a single sincere deed.